Hey, good afternoon. This is Douglas Crets. I'm an artist and a writer, and this bird on my shoulder is So-So. He is a 7-year-old Caique black-capped parrot. They come from like Venezuela, Colombia area in South America. He's got a little bit of his feathers gone because the previous owner who we got him from kind of kept him in a cage all the time, and if you know parrots, they'll pull out their feathers when they get bored. He's just eaten a pepper, so he may shit on me. You can already tell that he's been making a mess. So I am making this video kind of as a testimonial and an introduction of who I am. And I plan on making more of them. Some of them will be really boring, like this one, where I'll just talk to camera and I'll talk about the things that I do and why I'm doing them. Some of them I'll showcase my art and I'll talk about why I'm doing them. And then sometimes I will talk about current events. I'm also working on doing a podcast with another artist. We're taking that very slow, and eventually we will publish it, but we're not at that stage yet. So just a little bit more about me as context. I live in Hong Kong. I have had a long history of living in a bunch of different countries. I've lived in India, I've lived in Korea, I've lived in Taiwan, I lived in Silicon Valley for a while in New York City, and in all of these different places I was doing different jobs. I have a background as a teacher, as a journalist, as a TV reporter. I also have a background as a marketing person. I worked for Microsoft, and I also worked for Starbucks for a time. I was part of their digital marketing group, which at the time, back when social media in the 2010, 2013 era was really blowing up, was known for a lot of the innovative stuff that they were doing. But what I'm doing now is kind of venturing into a new place. I'm trying to do physical art and also digital art, which is something I've actually never done before. I'm aware of two things about this. One is that I'm not really a trained artist. I'm sort of self-taught. I only deal with what I know, and I use my art as a way of exploring what I don't know. And what I do know very well is literature. I have an MFA in creative writing at Syracuse University, and I went to school with some really, really good writers. Some of them are published: Miley Chapman, Rebecca Curtis, George Saunders, Mary Carr. Some of them were my teachers, some of them were my colleagues. Taught me a lot about language. So my domestic situation has a lot to do with language. And what I'm trying to do in my art, just to be brief, is I'm trying to do the same things in art that I've always tried to do in language, which is to pursue a kind of imagist or an image-focused exploration of reality. And also to talk about the interplay between what we perceive to be a reality and what we actually know to be reality, which is often disguised by language, even though we're using language to access it. What I thought I'd do with my digital art is to kind of take a philosophical pursuit. I thought I would take images that we typically see, so photos or shapes or colors or hues, and try to manipulate them, not using professional software in a professional way, but in ways that are uneducated, unprofessional, that have nothing to do with how they're really intended to be used, to see if by using software inappropriately, I can somehow break or cause a discordance between what is expected and what is actually realized. So I think one of the things about software that guides my practice is that I think software is developed with a mentality of linearity. And it's also created with an expectation that things should be, if not perfect, then they should work in the way that they're intended. So often what you see in things like Procreate or Notes or photo apps is they all behave in a specific way. So if you try to use a stylus brush in Procreate, there are some customizations you can make to it, but it always performs in a specific way, a way that is recognized as that brush type. And that's because it's skeuomorphism, really. It's a kind of adoption of reality in a form that's easily recognizable for most of the users. But if you look around the world, what you notice about the world is that it is not crisp and clear like vector image graphics. It is not easily understood. When you look very closely at things, You find fractals, aberrations, discrepancies. You find things that don't work. And I live in Hong Kong, and if you've ever been to Hong Kong, you know that one of the most interesting things about Hong Kong is that even though it is a highly populated city of 8.5 million people, even though it is incredibly crowded with people and very urban, only 25% of the island is urban. But in that urban density are all of these forms, like skyscrapers, shop windows, buses, cars, that from a very distant approach all look kind of the same. But very much up close, they all look very different because they have rust on them, glass cracks, they have caulking problems, they have things that stick out, things that have fallen off. And then you have the human situation. So I don't want to get too deep. I don't want to dive too deep. I hope you don't mind. So-so is very... These birds are extremely curious birds, and they are hyperactive birds. I don't know. They're like cockatoos on steroids. But he does this all the time. He just sits there and looks at things in different ways. But he's sort of an inspiration too, to get back to what I'm talking about. What I'm kind of trying to do with my art, I don't want to make this too long, is I'm trying to look upside down. I'm trying to look at the world in a way to understand how the perspective is formed and to understand why is the perspective so consistently adopted across people, no matter what the language barriers are or the cultural constraints are. I want to use the digital interface and eventually the physical forms of art to mismanage that or to re-articulate that in a way that doesn't seem to work at first, but in a collective effort, maybe as an assembly, as sort of like a program or a series of work, begins to look like a consistent new reality that is less illogical and at least temporarily logical. So that's my linguistic explanation of what I'm trying to do with art. Hopefully you can check out my portfolio and follow me on Twitter at DBC ____, which you can find in the links here. And we can explore this together. I've put together a collection. It's an open edition called The Black Box of AI. The trick about the black box of AI is that you don't know what's going on inside the AI, but holders of the AI token are going to get free art all the time for at least a year. There are about 362 days left. It costs 0.0004 ETH, which I think is like $12 or something like that. You can have up to 3 tokens. You can gift them to people. And one of them will include a picture of So-So and a ballerina. So if you don't like me and my pretty face, how can you say no to So-So? Okay, now you're going to break my camera. Okay, thank you very much for indulging me, and I hope that I can get to know you through my artwork.